Thank you, Darian. Welcome everybody to the weekly JupyterLab call. We don't have so much point to the agenda, but I will skip myself and let Gabriela start if it's fine for her. Yes, yeah, you are the second one.
Yeah, well, so I wanted to inform everyone that I had conducted a usability study on JupyterLab. So for those I haven't met yet, I'm a UX designer and researcher, and I've done a study with mostly beginner participants to uncover usability issues in the current JupyterLab, and also do some research on new features that don't exist yet, but that we all know are coming soon, and that we would want to know like how to implement them and where to put the buttons, etc. I think I won't go through the whole process of it, but I'll just share a quick presentation of the results, maybe just one or two results with you, and so that you can see what kind of things I was testing. And so all of the results that are sort of easily fixed, the issues that are easily fixed, I've created issues on GitHub so that anyone can go and have a look and create either a discussion or actually tackle the suggestion I provided following the issue. So let me share my screen. Okay. So I don't know if you may not all be familiar with what is a usability study. So basically I created a prototype that's not at all coded or developed with the current JupyterLab, plus a tiny bit of additional features like sharing with other, sharing a notebook with somebody else, being able to see tags, being able to see where other people are currently editing the notebook. So those are things we have in mind, but haven't been implemented yet. And also in this prototype, I recreated things that currently exist in JupyterLab that I wanted to test. So I created them exactly identical to how they behave and look like today. So I'm going to consisted of discovering the usability issues in the current features of JupyterLab in a very basic workflow, to test the new cell level features. So get a few insights about the toolbar, what actions are used or not by certain types of users. How do users use the tag management feature, and how do they add cells when they need to add a cell? And also to test new sharing features, so seeing who is editing what. So it happened with this will be shared. I'll share this after I already shared it yesterday in the community call. Also, you can go and have a look at the details of how the study plan was created, but the results and the personas that I did the test with. So there were beginner users and experienced users. The beginner users, so they were all between 18 and 25. They have a frequent use of JupyterLab, but they've only been using it for 1 to 2 months maximum. whereas the experienced users were over 40 and had been using it for approximately 10 years or more. I had 7 participants that represented the beginning user. So that was largely enough to uncover most of the usability issues. But for the experienced user, I only had 2. So most of the results that follow mainly concern the beginner user. So results, some example type 2 columns in the list of files. So that doesn't exist today. To see, I was wondering how can we inform users whether a document or a notebook has been shared with them, and how can we make a difference with the other files? So the first idea was to create 2 tabs. And so a user that knows they're going to open a shared file, go to the tab, shared with me. So this, for example, didn't work. And so at least now I can iterate and it works. This was never understood by the users for various reasons. Then there's were results about being able to see where people are in the different cells, who is working, being able to display tags, but in a better way than it is done today. Being able to add new cells because I noticed that in the usability test, when I asked the participants to add a new cell or they had to do it within another task, they never ever used the toolbar. And I think one of the reasons that came out is because most of the code is normally on the left, and it's actually very cumbersome to always be going to the far right of the cell, especially when you're on a big screen. And another result was that the raw button is useless and nobody uses it. So these are some examples of results I got from the usability test. I tested the tags also. How do people expect to rename them, to move to a cell, to delete a tag, and how do users expect to share once it's their turn to share the notebook with someone? So basically from here, there are 2 kinds of actions I took. One is listing some really easy usability issues that exist now in JupyterLab and can be like easily corrected, I think. For example, these 2 arrows to move a cell up or down, they don't have a disabled state. So when the cell is all at the bottom or all at the top, well, it looks like it's clickable when it actually isn't. And it's not, it can seem obvious because of course, when the cell is at the bottom, you can't push it further to the bottom, but it's still a cognitive something that takes a tiny bit of your cognitive space, just of add a disabled state to the button. And so those are very little things that I tried to cut down to the bare minimum, and I created issues for each of them. And then for the others, some that are bigger pieces, like all the tag management and all the user management and sharing, that can be iterated and tested again on new designs. So please tell me if you have questions about either the results or how it was conducted, or if you have ideas on what to do next to make it have an impact and to give people sort of action items to do things from here.
Thanks a lot, Gabriela, for the presentation, and thanks, Mike and Jason, for taking notes. Mike has a question in the chat. Which JupyterLab version did you base this study on? The table of content that some tag features remove in 4.0. Those are the questions. The second one I can probably answer.
Okay. To be honest, I don't know. But in my prototype, I mean, I didn't use that any version of JupyterLab, if that's what your question. It was a prototype that I created with only the features that I wanted to test. So I didn't give like JupyterLab to anyone. So on my prototype, there wasn't this right side panel with the tag management. I mean, it wasn't clickable. There was the button, but it wasn't clickable.
Mike, say thanks. So thanks, Gabriela.
And yeah, I can share the study itself. Well, it sort of goes, I can show you this presentation and the report that goes with it.
Awesome. That would be really nice if you can maybe add it to the notes. It would be really useful. And this is really interesting. Thank you, Gabriela. This is really valuable.
Thanks.
So Rick has another question on the chat. Asking if there are follow-up study with JupyterLab and follow-ups about real task. I think Gabriela has opened a couple of issues to discuss and decide what to do. Those are the follow-up.
Oh, do you mean like on the real JupyterLab? I think that's what Rick was means. Like, do I plan to? Well, yes, for the existing features, yes, but for those that don't exist, well, it's not possible. But for maybe I can show you quickly what it looks like. Like the prototype really, because I'm testing quite a basic workflow, I ask people to open a notebook, share it with someone. Imagine they are working in a team and they would like to see who are they. I don't need to have all the detailed workflows that JupyterLab provides. And okay, I've got it here. I'll just quickly share my screen again. It might be clearer. So this here is the prototype. It's an example of prototype that is clickable and that isn't is made with Figma, so it's got nothing to do with JupyterLab, but it's just like a design prototype. I don't know. I can really reproduce like exactly what Jupyter JupyterLab looks like and how it behaves, which allows me to add time environment. Okay, well, it's not working anymore. And I think that yes, and testing with the current JupyterLab can also be interesting. It can be a parallel track of finding the issues in JupyterLab, because I'm sure there's probably a lot of other things that can be improved. And yeah, getting statistics from JupyterLab would be great, but we would have to, like, we could think about what we want to get statistics about and measure them, but it could be really, really useful to have statistics, for example, on the use of the toolbar, and if there are features that are actually never used or very poorly used, and maybe try and understand why and do some research around that. Yeah, well, the thing about the keyboard shortcuts, well, I actually can reproduce that also in the prototype, but what happens a lot is it's experienced users. It's very verbal, the usability test. So at the beginning of the test, I asked the participants to try and think out aloud as much as possible. And so everyone sort of forgets that it's not really JupyterLab they're working with, but the prototype. So very quickly they go back to their mechanism, and if I ask, for example, to add a cell, a lot will intuitively use their keyboard straight away to do it. And even if it doesn't work, they'll just say, oh yeah, to do what you asked me to do, I would have used my keyboard. And I know because I just saw them do it. And so there are some limitations, but the way prototypes are created now is actually quite powerful.
So I just turn off the hot water for laundry. Just there's a little switch button, or you can close it out.
Yeah, Gabrielle, apparently you get unmuted. Do you have a question?
Sorry?
No, I think it was a mistake from Gabrielle. He got unmuted, not willingly. Sorry, Gabrielle. Thanks everybody for your enthusiasm, for asking questions about the tooling and the work of Gabriela. So if there are no more questions or comments, then we can move on. It seems it's only me. So it's going to be a short update. So last week we discussed the introduction of the enhancement features in JupyterLab. There were some follow-up tasks that were decided. So I have opened an issue in the security team repository for asking them about having their opinion and review of the features. I also have opened a PR. I did not go into the path of using an iframe because at first I was thinking like, should I iframe every notification? It seems a bit too much. So I was thinking probably I could iframe all the notification in single iframe, but then it was a bit tougher than what I wanted because I used some React library, and also I was thinking, how do you notify from the accessibility point of view, the fact that you can have a pop-up if the pop-up is within an iframe. So for now, what I decided to do is to use stricter option of the sanitizer. So the PR is linked in the note. And so for people interested, feel free to comment there and propose suggestion of doing it differently. And I have one question is, okay, maybe before going to that point, maybe Jason, as you raise your hand.
Yeah, I have a quick thought about that. I like how you really tried to pare down the options. I would suggest we even go further and just say like no formatting, just plain text messages to start with, and a single URL a user can click on. And the nice thing about having just plain text, say with a maximum size of, I don't know, whatever, Twitter or Mastodon or something, 400 characters or something, is it forces and it encourages by forcing messages to be very non-distracting with just a short sentence or two and a single read more, click here, something or other link. No images, no like bold blinking, whatever. Like the notification messages then are very, very simple and as least distracting as possible. And it takes care of all the security issues then.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the max length idea. It's true. It makes sense to do that. Okay, then.
Do we have notifications that need formatting, like bold or bullets or whatever?
It's because in the implementation of the notification, I said that you can use Markdown if you want. Mainly, the idea was to be able to easily add links. But yeah, I don't know. It's probably too noisy for a notification to have too much formatting in the notification text.
I would suggest we start simple and start as absolutely simple as we can. And then we can always go up from there, but it's hard to like pull back down features once they're launched.
Yeah, very true. So I do that. And then the other question is, actually, it's more about the process. What's the best way of requesting something from the Jupyter console? I know that there is the transition period right now and stuff like that, but I don't know, Darian, if your voice is back. Do you know what's the best way for doing that?
I don't know the best way for doing that. It's not dependent on my voice. It's dependent on my brain. Sorry.
That's fine. I tried to connect.
There's definitely. Well, I was going to say when I last looked into some of these things, I don't know. I got into using Open Graph and metadata and stuff to kind of make it richer things that you show to convey more information in less space, like a thumbnail and things like that. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, thanks for the input. But yeah, I agree with Jason. Let's first start simple and then extend from there.
Totally. Yeah.
I would
And that was
definitely be happy to like give it a look and make suggestions based on that, for sure.
Oh,
and
thanks, Andrew.
There's definitely like, we need to, I mean, it's complicated because you have this one human client who might try the application in multiple browsers. So you want to store their state client side, but they might throw out client side state, server side rather, that they might throw out server side state all the time because they're using like conda environments or they're clearing out, like it's a much tougher problem than the problem that like VS Code has, because VS Code kind of owns its entire space and knows the user's never going to clear it and knows that it can store some like last read value and it's always correct. We don't have any of those guarantees. And I'm not exactly sure how we stop ourselves from annoying users.
Actually, for now, I use a trick of not using the state. I'm using the config from the server API directly, because then it's single placed. It's independent on the workspace, and anytime you rerun the server or whatever from another environment, then it's going to be the same value that's read from there.
Oh, that's interesting. Cool.
Yeah, because I was thinking like, yeah, we need some kind of global state, and because it's not available for now, I use that trick for now. And I plan also to, because it's related probably to other options, to create a specific section for binder in the documentation for providing good default settings that, like for instance, that turn off the notification on binder, because that's probably something also people don't want to see. Like every time they launch a new binder for testing something, they don't want to get like first time pop-ups.
Can I suggest whatever? First of all, I tend to agree with Jason. It's always better to start simpler. But can I suggest that when you make a change like that, you also put notification to the best practices for the extension guide, because ideally there are going to be lots of people writing editors, or people like me who write other editors have been to JupyterLab. And I'd really like to follow best practices and not screw things up.
Yeah, I do that. Actually, we had an issue that because we have already released alphas with the features, it ended up to be in the documentation, in the stable documentation on read the doc, because there is a small trick about that. And so a user opened an issue saying, yeah, it's in the doc, but actually I cannot use it with the latest stable version. But yeah, definitely I will also add, when we land like the final version, how it is like simplify what you can do, what you cannot do on notification, then it will be part of the PR to update the documentation to clarify that part too.
Thank you, Frederic.
And with that, I think we can move to Steve.
Thanks, Fred. So I just want to give a heads up. Thanks, Fred and Jeremy, for handling the fallout from this. But we extracted what were the fixtures in Jupyter Server. We had this PyTest plugin module in Jupyter Server where you could use it by installing Jupyter Server with the extra test, and then get some nice fixtures. We extracted that out into a separate package called PyTest Jupyter, which we had tried to make like a year ago, and decided to back out of it because the way plugins work in PyTest is like they're automatically used if you use the entry point system, and we're like clobbering other extensions. So now it's an opt-in. And try to overcome some of that, and it has like basically 3 tiers. Like if you just install PyTest Jupyter, you get some like environment overrides to make sure you're running things in a clean environment, overriding all like the Jupyter paths, things like that. You can select the client add-in to get an echo kernel and a fixture to be able to run echo kernels, and then the server plugin has everything that was in that PyTest plugin on the Jupyter server. So now the recommendation is if you're previously relying on what was in Jupyter Server PyTest plugins, to switch over to PyTest Jupyter Server. And if you weren't, because you didn't want to take a dependency on that or whatever, or just to advertise the fact that those environment fixtures are now available in a self-contained thing that's not tied to a version of Jupyter Server, you don't have to depend on the server for your tests. And there's a conda recipe pending on that, just waiting for the maintainers to merge that. And that's it in that front.
Thanks, Steve.
Sure.
And if there are no other comment on that point, I think we can move to Mike.
Hi, I have a very brief point, just highlighting a pull request which originally was only intended to fix an issue with code mirror 6 migration with completion of tokens not working, but then had to have the scope expanded to change some of the APIs, and the most notable change is replacing the connector proxy with a new kind of object, which is reconciliator. So with the new completer refactor, we can have multiple providers of completions. So we can have a kite extension and a tab9 extension, an LSP server, and whatever. And then we want to combine the completions from all these sources so it is displayed consistently to the user. And there is a pull request which proposes some rather extensive changes to the API, but it is not breaking in any way because this is all 4.0 work. Just highlighting if anyone was interested or had questions.
Thanks, Mike, for the heads up on that discussion. I see Isabella is adding a last-minute point. I think I know one part of it.
Would you like to do it for me?
I think there is the accessibility meeting just after this one, like in 40 minutes, something like this.
Correct. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, wow. It's almost like when I say things once every 2 weeks. Maybe it starts working. Yeah, that's exactly it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks you for running those calls. So if nobody has additional points on record, maybe we can stop the record, or if somebody has some discussion, but it seems not. So Darian is gonna get the recording.